Hello and welcome back to the EyeStorm Live Lounge, where we talk to inspiring and interesting people about current topics for women in the UK and around the world. My name is Elfverson, I'm the founder of EyeStorm, and today I'm talking to Lisa Baskott, who is on a mission to make women and vulnerable people feel more safe at night. Hi Lisa, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Me. It's good to be here.
You're doing some amazing things, and we want to know more about your mission, which is really to make sure that women feel more safe at night, isn't it?
No, absolutely. It started off specifically looking at women, but actually, that has widened, if you like, into looking into vulnerable people. And within that category, I put young people, women, and girls, and also certain groups within society. So for me, the gay community is a big part of that. And looking at issues that individuals face, particularly within the nighttime economy when they're out at night, and what we can do within the security industry, but within society as well, to make that better.
Brilliant. So we're going to hear more about the actual business that you're creating, or the venture, the project, the mission. But I'm a little bit curious first to hear more about you, where you who is Lisa? Where do you come from? What's in your character?
Yeah, well, I'm a London girl, born and bred. I'm from a place in South London called Clapham, and I lived there all my life. And both my parents, now dead, were Jamaican, and they came to the country and met and were together and lived in London for about 37 years before they both decided to take early retirement and go back to Jamaica. So I've got my roots are in sort of Black British Londoner with Caribbean roots, which has been really nice. So having beautiful holidays as a young child out in Jamaica has been a real culturally rich part of my existence. I kind of had a traditional route, went off to university, did a law degree, decided I didn't want to be a barrister, much to my parents' chagrin. But I ended up in advertising, business to business, media, which I loved. And basically I stayed there for just under 25 years. During that time, I also had a passion for architecture and buildings and renovation. And I think I bought my first property when I was about, 23 years old, and
Wow.
renovated it and did well by it. And I thought, I've got I've got a talent here. And I was doing things in an age and in places within London that my friends thought I was completely bonkers at. But when it started to pay off, I think they all realised that maybe I was onto something. So that was a passion. And basically, after 25 years in advertising and divorce, I decided that I was going to take a leap, basically, and do something that, drove me passionately. So I left advertising and I full-time became a single mum overnight, with a bit of capital behind me. And I decided that I was going to, build on what I'd been doing for over sort of nearly a 20-year period, buying and selling and renovating properties. And so I set up as a sole trader and did that. And that still is going on in the background. But obviously, with the start of second line of defense, that's taken a back seat. But it really is my passion. And I look for properties in seaside coastal towns that have seen better days, that I can basically bring back to life, if you like. I inject a fair amount of money into them, but I restore them in a way that brings them back to their former glory. So it's a beautiful process to go through, and it's a real massive sense of achievement once you've done it. So a project could take anywhere from 3 months to 6 months, depending. And I tend to sort of start looking at a new project every 3 or 4 years, depending how much time, effort, and money I've had to put into it.
Oh, fantastic. That's both inspiring, and I know how frustrating it is in that when you're in the midst of that renovation, but when it's done, it's so satisfying, isn't it?
Yeah.
So moving on a little bit closer to now then, I know that you still do several things because you're a magistrate as well. Tell or even explain a little bit more about what that means for people who don't know.
Yeah. So magistrates are part of the judicial system in England and Wales. And essentially it's based on, if you like, being judged by your peers, but not in the sense of a judge and a jury. If you like, a magistrate forms both judge and jury in one role. And in the UK, the all cases start and end. About 97% of cases start and end in a magistrate's court. And about the 3 or 4% that we don't have jurisdiction for is because we don't have the sentencing powers. We can sentence for up to 12 months. Anything, for example, like murder or rape, you would send that to a higher court, the Crown Court, because the sentencing, obviously, you would imagine, is going to be much greater. A magistrate's court is made up of 3 magistrates sitting on a bench, and there is a legal advisor in that room who will advise the magistrates on points of law. As a magistrate, you do not have to be legally qualified. You just need to possess a certain number of qualities that they look for. So the ability to be non-judgmental, for example, to avoid bias, to have empathy and compassion. And you bring those qualities to the role through life experience, essentially. And so that's what they're looking for. And we have a tool which is called a sentencing guideline, where pretty much every offence is listed, and there are sort of ranges of what you can apply as a bench to that. So that's what magistrates do. This goes back to sort of old English time, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And I think people find it quite a surprise to understand that it's a voluntary role. We do not get paid for this. So this is me wanting to give back to my community in a way. It's absolutely important to me as a Black woman, as a Black British woman, to be representative, right? So I wanted other young, particularly young Black boys and girls, when they walked, if they were caught up in part of the criminal justice system, it was important for me that they understood that they were walking into a level playing field. Not that they were going to get treated more favorably or less favorably, just the same.
But with justice and the same as anyone, which should in court, of course.
Absolutely. And it absolutely was something that I felt very, very passionate about. And that's the thing that continues to drive me today, particularly young people. Anything that I can do to potentially change the life of young people within the criminal justice system by offering them a way out. And when I say way out, showing them that there might be a different path for them. It's the thing that keeps me going. And I've been doing that now for 11 years. And outside, I keep saying to people that outside of having my 2 children, it's probably, and maybe the mission that I'm on now, it's probably the most important thing I've ever done in my life.
So, second line defense, tell us, what is it? What is your mission?
Yeah, well, I moved from London, relocated from London just over 2 years ago. And I moved to Brighton. I live in Hove. And super excited about that move. And within 7-10 days of moving here, I remember turning the TV on and the volume was down, but there was this sort of a news bulletin that looked, you get the impression that something is important. So I turned the volume up and I just heard Clapham, funnily enough, my hometown. Nothing happens in Clapham. And talking about a young woman, hadn't been seen since the night before. Parents hadn't heard from her, boyfriend hadn't heard from her. And then just immediately there was this rising sense of panic. And I knew that they were not going to find this young woman alive. And it was, something that I'd seen and heard before over the years, but there was something that resonated this time. And maybe it was because I had children who were much older than they had been at the time when I'd heard all these other stories. within a couple of days, I found out that the person who had raped, murdered, and abducted her was a police officer. So for me, as a magistrate of 11 years, that was hard for me to swallow. You know, the fact that someone in a position of power there to safeguard the general public was abusing it in every possible way. And I, you know, outside of dismay and disbelief, it was pure rage, pure anger, and like I'd never felt before. But as I said to you before, I think this time things were hitting so much closer to home for me. This was a place that I grew up in as a young woman and felt nothing but happiness and freedom, and never ever once thought about, you know, not to the extent that we do now, having to look over my shoulder. I felt safe, relatively safe. But now I have two children. I have a boy and a girl. My daughter has just turned 16, and very, very soon she too will potentially be walking the streets, you know, of this country, just like Sarah Everard was that night. And I just...
So we're obviously talking about someone who many people recognize now as Sarah Everard in Clapham.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you know, I think the biggest takeaway for me for all of that was this girl didn't stand a chance. She did absolutely everything that she's been conditioned to do from the youngest of age. And it's always about the woman having to take that responsibility on herself, to minimize herself, to make herself look less attractive, make yourself smaller, walk like a man, walk on the light street of the side of the road, wear comfortable shoes, don't wear your skirt so short. Ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. But this is what we are taught as young women that we need to do. And this is what this young girl did. Yet still, you cannot protect yourself from a man who uses his police identity card to stop you in a street, to tell you that you're breaking COVID rules, to use his police issued handcuffs to strap you into a car, and then to use his police issued belt to strangle you and then rape you. You do not stand a chance. Now, I, as a woman, do not believe that I need to spend the rest of my life having to look out for predatory men. I don't need to belittle myself. I don't need to make myself feel small. I should be able to walk down the street without fear of harm or a threat of violence. And I absolutely demand that for my children. And in particular, my young 16-year-old daughter who's about to embark on her life and to start living her life as her true authentic self. I, as a mother, do not want to bring her into the world and then have to tell her that she needs to minimize herself, that she can't be who she is because of fear of something happening to her. That for me was just unacceptable. And so,
you know, I'm sitting here with a big lump in my throat because it is just absolutely, first of all, it's incomprehensible and it's all so tragic. And we've all been there. You and I have been out and we do the same. Still, at my age, I still need to think these things through. How do I get home? Who is there? Phone in the hand, wear the right shoes, you know, take a taxi, spend the extra money, the whole way. And what can we do about it? Tell me what you are hoping to do.
Well, the interesting thing is that, you know, this journey and my sort of me embarking on trying to change a huge industry sector, the private security industry sector, particularly at the frontline level, was because I decided enough was enough. As a society, we find ourselves living in a country where, when I grew up, there used to be policemen walking on the street. You know, you'd be able to go and call a bobby, right? Go and put your hand up and say, look, something down the road to someone. That stopped a long time ago. And essentially what has filled those roles is a growing and very rich industry sector called the private security sector. Now, when I scratched beneath the surface and had a look at how that industry sector at that level was being managed, I was appalled. There are people who are basically, there's a massive disconnect between the people doing those jobs and the people crossing thresholds into venues. And the lack of sort of industry benchmarks and standards over a period of time has meant that the perception, and it's the real one, is that big burly blokes tend to be the people standing on those doors. They tend not to necessarily be happy in those roles because those roles are generally antisocial hours. They are subject to abuse. The pay is poor. And they are there generally in their second job or third job capacity. So they're not really in the mood for chit-chatting. They don't really give a shit about you as a person. They're there to make that extra money, do their time and go. Now, it's not 100% their fault. However, it is the industry's fault. And both the regulator and big security companies have an awful lot to do with the lack of cohesion around the integrity of the people that wear that blue badge on their arm. And essentially what had happened is that in 2001, the industry was regulated. It was the Wild West before, and it's slightly better now. But essentially what the regulator said is, here are a set of rules. Off you go. Regulate yourselves. Well, you sort it out among yourselves. Well, when that industry is run by men who tend to be ex-police officers coming from forces like the Metropolitan Police, you can understand the kind of cultural crossover that they've taken from one way of working into another. Now, the difference is that when those people are the ones that are dealing with the general public, and that there is this disconnect, and that their level of awareness around the journeys that individual vulnerable groups go through, then we're going to have a problem. Those people are not going to be relevant in their roles if they don't have a true understanding of the individuals who, in some cases, have collective experiences. Women, as a group of people, have common experiences. As I said to you before, we have to think about what we wear. We have to think about what side of the road we walk on, what time of day it is, whether we are intoxicated or not on the way home. Do we have enough money for a taxi home? Is our phone charged up? Because all the while we are worried and we fear about the threat of violence. A man in this country does not have that issue unless they are and form a part of a group, for example, the gay community, or have issues around mental health or neurodiversity. Outside of that, most men walk down the street without even thinking about this. And the problem, I think, that we have today in society is that women have spent far too long being quiet about what they've gone through for years. And men have blissfully, ignorantly gone about going, well, if you haven't said anything to us, how are we supposed to know there's a problem? Tame, lame response. But that is essentially what's happened. And we saw, and I believe that there has been this pivotal change in society's response, in particular, to violence against women and girls. And I think this all started off pretty much on a large scale with the Me Too movement. All of a sudden, women found the courage to come out of their shells and say, this is not just happening. This is systemic. This is what this industry is about. It's not just a little thing that happened every now and again. It's what happens all the time. And the reason we don't hear about it is that women don't talk about it. And I think that paved a way, I think, to women opening up. But in particular, what we saw on the back of that is after Sarah Everard's murder and the peaceful vigil that took place on Clapham Common, and then the Metropolitan Police's response to it, well, I mean, that just completely sums it up. When I talk about this disconnect between what was actually happening and how people needed to grieve for something that was violently done by one of theirs to someone like us, and their response was to violently handle them in front of the world. Well, if that wasn't a wake-up call for, police forces across the country, particularly the Metropolitan Police, then I don't know. And it was based on that, and also that we have, groups of individuals coming through, the millennials, the Gen Zs, who have a very different attitude to the way that things are done. They're not of our sort of time where, and I would imagine that I'm 53 years old. Me and my peers are probably quite forthright, but nowhere near, I believe, in the same way as millennial and Gen Zs. And I think we can learn a lot from them. Their demands to be treated and in a particular way and to be heard is something like women like me, definitely, I have learned from. And it was based on their forthrightness and the way that I saw social media, and particularly that cohort, that generation, deal with the aftermath of George Floyd and his murder. I realized, you know what, particularly because we've been locked down for a couple of, that people do understand the difference between right and wrong. People do understand what injustice looks like. And when they come together, real things happen, movements happen, shifts, cultural shifts in thoughts and behavior happens. And it got me thinking, basically. I am not going to wait for another 25 years for an industry sector that's been regulated, has 400,000 people supposedly out there operating, and only 10% are women. We are in a world in the UK where 51% of the population are made up of people that look like me. Yet there's no representation of me on those doors, on it, and even when I need them the most. When I feel that I've been spiked in a pub or a club, or someone has come and touched me up at a bar, and I need some help and reassurance that sort of behavior is unacceptable and I feel protected, I am less likely to want to go and talk to a man that looks like, the 6'4" honey monster. We're not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And it's a shame. And I think there is a need for widespread education around awareness, around the changes in the demographics of the society that we live in, and how diverse and rich culturally it is. But that really needs to be adequately reflected in the diversity of the teams who are there to safeguard us. And I think more importantly, that there has been a move away from the idea of safeguarding people and much more towards safeguarding things, premises, data, intelligence.
That is so true. So tell us more practically about second line defense and what the plan is.
So my light bulb moment was, we've got to change the way that things are done. And I am not going to rest until the world that I brought my two children into is going to be significantly different for them. I want better. I demand better for them. So in one of those moments that you do in bed, I thought, well, the industry and I are going to have a little chat about this, and they're going to have to come clean about how inept they've been over the years and how they have let us down by not regulating themselves robustly enough, by allowing things, scenarios like the Manchester Arena and the Brixton Academy to happen because people are being underpaid, so they think they can take side money on the side, letting people into venues where it's going to create overcrowding. These things happen because people forget that they're dealing with people. They can go, well, I take that 50 quid in my hand, but not realizing, but by doing that is going to have a direct consequence on someone's safety. They've somehow in their mind separated the two acts, and I need to bring them firmly back into focus and say, no, that thing will eventually lead to that other thing happening. And in the case of Brixton, 2 people died, one of which was a security officer, another a young woman with 2 children, based on greed, based on, corruption within that particular security company for that venue. But it's also because of lack of oversight. So the people who run the venue not doing their due diligence into the companies who are supposedly providing safeguarding measures. And again, we need to understand that we live in a world now where we have to be collectively responsible for the things that affect our everyday. So we all have mums, we all have brothers and sisters and aunties and uncles. They all go out, they all use these venues. I mean, I say to my friends, there but for the grace of God, my children or I were not in the Brixton Academy. This is a place that I've been to since the age of 14. My children have been to concerts there. It could very well have been my daughter. And I need to bring that front and centre into the minds of people who run this industry. And
so how is that going to happen? We have what, nearly half a million frontline and security guards. How is that going to change? How are you going to reach them?
Well, for me, it's about, well, I've started off by putting my money where my mouth is, by setting up this recruitment company to find the very best people. So those with integrity, those who understand what it is I'm trying to do in the industry, but also to show the industry that it can be done. I am speaking to a segment of our community, as in, population within the UK, that is pretty much just been ignored by the industry sector. Apart from anything else, the richness and the diversity that women and all their common experiences and skills can bring to a role like that is immeasurable. And the fact that you're just ignoring them, well, it just beggars belief. So it's about showing them what they're missing out on and how that's going to affect their bottom line, apart from anything else. But also, it just makes sense. It just makes sense. Women, young children are more likely to want to go and speak to someone who understands their experience. But it's also about raising the awareness and the levels of the people that are currently wearing that badge. At the moment, there is no common sort of benchmark or standards. What a company in Manchester might be doing will bear no resemblance to the standards adhered to in Bath. That cannot be in an industry sector where we are dealing with the general public. This is a customer experience that we are frontline, and we're dealing with, people at the start of, generally speaking, their nights out. They have the right to start that night and end that night in exactly the same way, without fear of threat of violence, without being spiked or bothered or fretting how they're going to get home in the evening. So it's about saying to the industry, come on now, you've had long enough to self-regulate. It's not working. And it's not working because you don't really understand what it is you need to do as an organisation or organisations to truly bring about change.
Could you give us a few examples of what could be missed by someone at the door, for someone vulnerable or something has happened? And if that's not picked up on, what could that be, for example?
I'll give you a really good example there, and it's happened on more than one occasion in the early stages of me doing this role, because of when I had the light bulb moment and I realized that I was going to set up second line of defense and go and find, an army of people with the vision that I had and who worked and had the integrity that I had. I knew that I didn't just have to go off and get the training. I had to actually go and do the work. I had to be seen to be believed, essentially. But also I needed to talk to people currently in those jobs, male and female. But I also wanted to speak to the general public about their perception of what safeguarding looked like, whether they felt that they were getting it, whether it needed to change, and if so, how, what would make a difference. So that was invaluable to me. But very early on in that stage, I would be on the door and I would see certain, and they were men looking at the queue of people before us, seeing, let's say, 2 or 3 groups of girls, and maybe 1 or 2 people in that group were merry, slightly intoxicated. Now, as a woman, my way of handling that and the way that they actually handle it were immediately like poles apart. What I saw on more than one occasion is that the door supervisor was willing to separate that group of young girls. So he would stand on the door and say, you're drunk, you're not coming in. Now, don't get me wrong. He is well within his rights not to allow 2 intoxicated people into a venue, because it is his job to not allow that. We can't serve alcohol to people who are visibly drunk already. That's fine. However, you have a situation where you have 6 young girls, all averaging 18 or 19. You separate 1 or 2 of those girls from the rest of their group. What you are doing is you are immediately isolating those 2 individuals and making them even more vulnerable than they were when they were with that group. Now, an easy way to deal with a situation like that is to say, none of you are coming in. And what you're going to do is you're going to take your 2 friends around the corner to Burger King. You're going to give her some food because she's probably not had any food all day. And you're going to sober her up. My name's Lisa. Once you've done that, come back and have a talk to me. We'll take an assessment as to whether or not I think I can trust you to go back into this premises on the basis that you're no longer as pissed as you were when you came out. Really very simple, because my immediate thought about that was not that she was drunk. It's obvious that she's drunk and it's obvious that she can't go in like that. But it's, how can I manage this situation so that a group of young girls stay together and are much more protected as a group of people? How can we do that so as not to isolate and therefore put a beacon on the heads of 2 young people in a way that, you know, and it's about understanding the dynamics of what the consequences could potentially be for those 2 people. I've seen door supervisors do it with 1 person. So a group of people, 1 person pushed out, isolated, you're not coming in. And I'm like, no. No.
They have no training on any of this at all. There's no training. It's just to protect the property, make sure that no one gets in who's too drunk, but not spotting anything to do with mental health, vulnerability, anything like that.
Absolutely. And also this idea, you know, if you think about neurodiversity, that may present itself as someone being loud, obnoxious, or drunk, when in fact they're not, right? They are reacting to a particular environment. Now, if you'd paid attention to your cue as they were coming in and you saw that person and they were perfectly fine when they came through the door, and within 5 minutes, there's no way someone can get drunk that quickly. If they weren't drunk at the point that they crossed the door, they're certainly not drunk now within 5 minutes. What is it about that person do you need to find out that has triggered him or her? Something has probably triggered him. What is it? You know, and it's about just picking up on those nuances. And you've got plenty of time when you're standing on a door and you're having a look at a queue of people. I make assessments about people 5 minutes, 10 minutes before they come to me. You know, I often used to walk up and down the queues outside venues, just having a little listen to conversations, just having a little look about who might be slightly agitated, who might not be, whether there's any kind of discord going on between friends. Because you know what happens, they go out, they're having a great time, and then they're having an argument with each other. What's going on? And trying to pick up on those nuances, because that is going to be the difference between someone getting attacked on the way home, or, you know, or beaten up on the way home, or bothered inside a club. And those are skills that we all have in us, but somewhere along the line, we don't feel that role, that's what that role isn't about. It is what that role is about. It's about customer care. It's about safeguarding people, not premises. It's about empathy. And I can't, that word, it can't be overused in that role. Empathy. You know, you might not be a millennial, you might not be a Gen Z, you might not understand that she's barely got any clothes on and, you know, it's freezing cold out. That's not for you to worry about. What you need to worry about is, how am I going to ensure that that person is as safe as they are now in that queue, as they will be in the club, as they might be on the way home. That's all. That's what you need to worry about. And I think we need to, and this is widespread education that is needed. You know, there are people in those roles that I don't think will ever get it, and I just hope that their badges will never renew and that they won't come back to the industry. Yeah, let's hope. But there are plenty, and I think that the biggest bulk of them are people that have just never been given the opportunity to be aware of these things. No training. There is no such thing as continued professional development within the frontline security sector. The regulator basically said, well, we'll leave that to the security companies to sort out. What security company is going to spend money or invest in if they don't have to? And that essentially is what's happened for 23 years. For 23 years, they've gotten away with not having to invest in their people, which means that they end up with anyone. And people
the industry is about to change, thanks to you, Lisa. We need more of you. Who would you like to be contacted by?
Well, I still want to have conversations with big security companies who I believe should be leading by example. And I believe if they set the standards, if they set the benchmark, then the rest will have either follow or have to get out of the game. I genuinely believe that. But I also want to speak to, in particular, to women out there, to women who would never have considered the private security industry as a go-to professional pathway. And I get it. I get why they don't. But I say to them, believe me when I say that I am, the conversations that I'm out there having with potential women who might want to cross over into the industry, I'm also having these conversations about the way in which big security companies need to make themselves more palatable and attractive to get the best type of people. And I want women in particular to know that they are part of the solution to the change that I'm invoking. And again, I have to say to them that we've got to open our mouths and we have to speak up about our experiences and not bottle them up anymore. And we need to do that and channel that in a real positive way. And that we also need to be seen to be believed. And I believe that there are women working in other industry sectors with beautifully transferable skills that are desperately needed in the private security industry sector. We need to show them how it can be done. So I see myself as a conductor. I'm orchestrating. So I'm out there educating on both sides, both to women, giving them telling them the reasons why I think their skill set, they are needed in the industry. But I'm also talking specifically directly to the industry, saying this is where you need to think about checking yourself. What are your policies like? Everybody's ticking the diversity and inclusion, but what does that actually mean? Are you writing those words in policy documents but actually behaving in a completely different way? Does this extend to the people that you use to do contracting work for you? Does it run through every aspect of your business? Are you truly, truly invested in this? Because if you are, you will get there. You will get there. But if you're not, if this is just a tick box exercise, then you don't get it, basically.
Lisa, where can people find you? Second Line?
Yeah, so it's my website address is Second Line of Defence, and that's 2ndlineofdefence.com. And yeah, go there if you're interested in security work, if you're interested as a big company in working with me, helping you find more women in particular, looking at diversity issues within your recruitment and retention policy, then I'm here to help. But generally speaking, if you just want to be a part of this change, this movement, dressing the imbalance that we currently have within the system, then just reach out to me. I ask people at the end of any kind of talk that I give or article that I write to just talk to one person that they know about what it is I'm doing, whether that's your aunt or your uncle or your brother or your godmother or your godfather. Talk to them about what it is I'm trying to achieve and why. And let's get our voices heard, basically, because that's how change happens. And we need to make sure that this conversation stays at the top of the agenda forever, basically, until we start to see practical, tangible differences in our life, particularly within the nighttime economy. So that's my aim. That's my goal, for the world to be a different place. I know it sounds all sort of, to bring that back, that sense of community, that sense of responsibility, collective responsibility, doing the right thing, right?
You are doing the right thing. You're taking on a huge mission, but it's so important. I think we should all be super grateful to you. And so do follow Lisa. You're Lisa Baskott with K and 2T on LinkedIn, and Second Line of Defense on social media. I will write it all around the video and in the video as well. Good luck.
Thank you.
Take it easy, because I know you're a workhorse. You do so much. You talk and you train and you teach and you speak and you write. So do take it easy, but good luck, and we'll be following you. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Mee. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Thank you very much. And thank you for listening and watching the EyeStorm Live Lounge episode. And we'll be back soon with more. Thank you. Bye.